does, again, it comes to the question of what is it leading to? Where are all these things coming to? Because the human system has slow elements to it, like the blood, the bones, digestion. These are slow moving parts, right? But it seems to be that we're being pushed more and more into the brain and the nerves of ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you can almost visibly see people more and more nervous, you know, when they're doing simple tasks, there's a sort of jerking because there's this nervousness. I mean, you might say, well, there is other reasons for that, and there are. But, you know, I was thinking about the way people used to dance 50 or 60 years ago. And it was very much the rhythms of things on the planet. You know, you think of the waves, and then you think of the waltz, stuff. There's reflected energies of the planet. But since really the Beatles, since the 60s, when there was a lot of talk of new energies coming into the planet that the hippies picked up on, you had all this rock and roll. And if you imagine a Beatles clip, and you turn the sound off, all this jerking and the subsequent disco era with Michael Jackson, without the sound, it looks like people are being plugged into an electric socket, you know, and
it's like they're being electrocuted,
electrocuted or something. And it again, it reflects something coming into an intensity that it makes you wonder if we're getting pushed to the point of popping through to another level of engagement with even other systems inside the human body.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
The unseen aspects,
Yes.
the higher faculties and the mind and the aura, the electromagnetic system around us.
Yes, and that's the thing, even using that, you talk about pushing almost up against like a barrier. That aircraft analogy is very interesting, because when a jet, and the first time they did it, they broke the sound barrier. So 300, 400, 500 miles per hour, the air that you're flying through becomes like really dense, like water, and it stops you from going any faster, and the whole plane sort of shakes. And you know, you might have seen the documentaries about it, but there's that point where it builds up enough speed and it goes pow and breaks through the sound barrier, and then it's totally still, twice as fast, and everything's under control. So you get that sort of sense about it. And it was interesting, in the late 60s, a man called Alvin Toffler, who was just, you know, monitoring. You get these people, they sometimes seem to observe trends rather than be caught up in it. And he was observing all this increasing in speeds and rates of change. And, you know, he wrote a book called Future Shock, because he said, you know, this is going to be a thing in the future where we're going to have to learn how to cope with it and adapt, because it's just going to be too much change too fast in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, and I think one of the features in the prophecies, because again, we're talking about different people, different times, different locations on the planet, but they talk about for example, in the case of the Inca, they talked about a new model of human appearing.
Right.
They call Homo Luminous. And you know, the story of it is that apparently when the Spanish arrived, a certain group of Incas fled to the mountains to preserve. They saw that what was going to happen. They fled to the mountains to preserve the knowledge and the understandings and the connections really that they had. And they believe that there were 500-year cycles.
Right.
Where things refreshed and phoenixed, which again is interesting about corresponding prophecies, because the Greeks took out of Egypt the idea of the phoenix, and the phoenix was the bird that was reborn out of the ashes.
Yes.
Ashes saying that something was destroyed for there to be a possibility of the rebirth.
Yes.
And that it occurred every 500 years.
Yes.
So there's a place on the other side of the world also talking about a 500-year cycle. And one of the ways actually you can see the trace of history of the appearance of major moments in human history, they do land pretty much on a 500-year wave pattern. And so anyway, they had actually foreseen this occurring. And so they knew that this change was coming with the Spanish, and there was a complete change, of course. but they reappeared 500 years later. Recently, about 50 or 60 years ago, these people came down from the mountains and they said, it's time again, the change is upon us, this new change will occur. And they said the Homo Luminous is appearing, and it's already appearing and it will come. And it's to do with a new frequency of energy that the human will need to tune into. And one of the hallmarks of this is that what they call the condor and the eagle will need to fly together again. So the condor corresponds to the heart and the eagle corresponds to the brain. And what they said is in this period of time, the eagle had almost killed the condor.
Wow.
In other words, and you can see it, it's quite evident, right? There's been such a destruction of everything heart-based. You know, the word heart anagrams to earth. So the earth itself, the arts, the fineness, the feminine has been crunched in multiple ways. And so there was a separation of these two elements. And you can, even at an individual level, so many people battling with their emotions, traumas, the brain, there's a kind of brain and heart disconnect right down on an individual level. But apparently now it's a time of a coherence between these two elements again. And it's very interesting again, because the symbol for the age that we're coming into of Aquarius is that those two lines that zigzag together, as opposed to the symbol of the last zodiacal age we've been in, which is the two fish of the Piscean age pointing in different directions, which seems to indicate contradiction again. So I'm here in Brazil, I've been to Peru twice, and they take this stuff very seriously, of course, because there's, just in Cusco alone, there's 360 sacred sites around the city, obviously corresponding to the calendar. And if you think about Machu Picchu, how they got those blocks up the mountain, however they did it, before you get into the technicalities, the fact of the effort shows an incredible devotion to elevating the human spirit, to reaching for some sort of religious connection. So when they talk about this kind of prophecy, it's respectful to listen, try to understand what they say. But of course, the modern brain tends to think, if it's not on my screen, if it doesn't make immediate sense in the way that I understand the world, it's not relevant. But very beautiful prophecy coming from the neighbors here in Peru.
Yeah, and that point about the separation between the heart and the head, isn't it interesting that the Hopi Indian prophecy, and they have that large boulder it's got a hieroglyph drawn on it. And I'd never noticed it before, but one of the elders was explaining it. And if you look closely, the head is not connected to the body. And he explained that exact same thing, that, you know, it's part of the reason for computers and the speeds of change and all the rest of it, is that's the sort of thing that the brain comes up with. And, you know, we've only got to look at how that technology can be very disconnected from actual life, and people can become obsessed with all of that. And we're now starting to see the problems with children and their psychology and education and behavior patterns because of too much technology. So that separation between heart and body, I think, you know, that is another important thread that seems to be common with those prophecies.